All right, welcome to TIL Talks with Chris White, where we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies, both with patients and caregivers, along with industry leaders. Let's get going. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. And we are up. Welcome back, everybody, to TIL Talks with Chris White. I want to welcome back my guest for the third time, Dr. John Powderly from Carolina Bio-Oncology and Biocytics. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. John, thank you so much for coming on. And as always, let's get going. So, what's up, John? How's everything been going, man? Tell me about things,
Good.
dude.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be on your program again, and thank you. So, yeah, I think we're very busy here with patient volumes and immunotherapy studies. So, we've opened now about a new study about every 3 to 4 weeks. We're opening up new immunotherapy studies. So,
Cool.
the field is hot. The field is growing with lots of new promising immunotherapy research trials, and so that's good news for your audience. Yeah, and the last few talks we've had have been a lot around immunotherapy, from side effects to good side effects to other toxicities that we got to be aware of, and also about that really the patients are empowered. So we want patients to know where to look for trials, how they can get involved, so they can think just beyond their local immediate, primary oncologist to look out and see where are the institutions around their region to get access to good immunotherapy trials.
It's all about one knowing just to even ask the questions, because for whether it's a rare disease or a rare cancer or anything like that, when you have to go to the doctor and then you hear some news where it's not very positive, it's a shocking thing to a patient, their family, to anybody really, to intake it all, and you almost kind of freeze up. And so just a little bit of knowledge, or just something that rings that bell that goes, oh, wait a minute, like I remember hearing something about that from this social media clip or this podcast, or sparks that reminder to just ask the questions of, hey, like, what kind of clinical trials do you got going on, or what cell therapies you're working on? If you don't have them, who does?
Yeah.
And that is so important. And as the field is advancing and changing so rapidly, it's hard to keep up with, whether you're on the industry side, the research and development, the medical, the clinical, but just as a patient in general, like, you only know what until you need to know it. And so that is another reason why I feel that these kind of conversations that we have are just so important. And I want to remind everybody that John and I, we don't plan our conversations out ahead of time. Nothing scripted. It's all ad hoc, off the hook, off the cuff. And there's a lot of things that come up within our conversations that I end up going back and listening to and resonating with and going, oh my God, like that really hit home. And like there was a lot of analytics that came along with that shows that these points are really getting hit on. And today, as we're recording this, is September 30th, and is known as Rare Cancer Day. And as I was saying earlier off camera, I'm an ultra rare cancer survivor, and the odds of getting the type of cancer that I had is 2.1 per million just for mucosal melanoma. And out of the subtypes of mucosal melanoma, you can get it in the head and neck, which is 50% of mucosal melanoma. That's sinonasal, usually a polyp in the nostril or somewhere around there. You have ocular and uveal, which is within the tear ducts, eye ducts, and like we said, anywhere where you have a mucous membrane. But anorectal mucosal melanoma, which makes up about 25% or so of mucosal melanoma, is extremely rare, and the average age to get that diagnosis is age 70, and I was 36 at the time. So just the rareness factor keeps on coming down and down. And when we were talking on our last conversation last month, we started to get into and talk about our food system and the statistics of the average diagnosis of people that are in their 40s and 50s are increasing, and then the younger generations just overall, and also started to talk about our food system. What has changed over the last like 70 years or so, and a lot of it is our food and the ingredients of it. And I remember talking and bringing up microbiome and gut health and that sort of thing. And so for today, we'll let the conversation flow, but I'd really like to get into some of the things that help relate to one's health when it comes to these unknown causes for any cancer, especially like rare cancers. But when it comes to that, there's only so many approved treatments. And so that's why clinical trials, especially phase 1, I've had a lot of people that I've connected with, especially like on this program, where a phase 1 clinical trial was their end game and was the key. And so I know I just kind of went on a little tangent about that, but I want to definitely hear you weigh in on your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, no,
And
there's definitely, so just in the scientific literature, as we see, and these patients ask all the time, what can I eat? What can I do better? And you tell them what we're reading in the literature that we're seeing amongst the physician conferences and the big SITCs and the big ASCOs are bearing this out. And a couple of the themes that we're seeing that patients should know about is, yes, an abnormal gut microbiome does seem to cause a lot of issues that when you are on chemotherapy, the chemotherapy can affect the lining of your gut. Right, all those little microvilli that absorb nutrients, and that gets sloughed off slowly with a few cell layers at a time. It gets thinner and thinner, and the gut microbiome, the gut itself, is like tissue paper thin after many rounds of chemo. And then, so when it's tissue paper thin, you can't absorb nutrients, and then
kind of washes out, how it goes in, goes out.
And then when they eat bad foods, meaning like the American diet, greasy fried foods, that will cause bloating,
Processed,
processed
frozen.
foods. The bowels don't move, they get constipated, and that leads to a very abnormal gut microbiome. And when you have an abnormal gut microbiome, we tell patients, and now this is borne out in the literature and a lot of the evidence, that if there's inflammation in the gut from dysbiosis, which is abnormal, healthy gut just being abnormal, the lining of the GI tract is messed up, that will distract the immune system. Instead of fighting the cancer, it's trying to heal the gut. And so it's definitely, we tell our cancer patients when they're on immunotherapy and they're getting off their old fashioned 1980s chemo and their gut slowly heals, which may take many months to grow the full lining of the GI tract back. We tell them how to eat healthy. Usually it's the spouse asking the question, what can he eat? He doesn't like his favorite foods. I'm like, okay, first of all, dear
Yeah.
spouse, no guilt trip. We know cancer patients are sick. They have a poor appetite. They don't like any foods. The smell of foods make them nauseated. They can't eat a full meal. So first thing
It's hard to describe, and you just hit that nail on the head right there. When you're sick like that, it's you want to eat, but nothing really sounds good, and it's hard to put anything down.
So the first dynamic we often see, this is stage 4 cancer patients, or really any cancer patient, once you're on like 4 or 5 months of chemo, you can relate. The spouse is very upset because she'll cook the favorite meal of this, the husband, and she'll be upset. He doesn't want to eat it. And doctor, what can you do? I mean, it's a lot of the cancer patient feels like he becomes a burden because he can't eat as much. The wife feels like she can't provide to make him happy because he doesn't want to eat and he's losing weight, and because the lining of the GI tract is getting thinner and thinner. So really what I first try to do is break that dynamic and say, dear caregiver, dear spouse, I understand, and I want you to understand there's no way with all his chemo or his stage 4 cancer that's heavily burdened, he's not going to have an appetite. He's not going to sit down and eat a whole meal. He's not going to want his favorite foods and be able to do that. But what he can do, or she, if it's the husband being the doting good spouse trying to help, what he can do or she can do is have small supplements throughout the day to help get nutrition in that's easy to absorb and easy to digest.
Like, are you talking about like those Ensure drinks
A
or
little bit.
something
So
like
the
that?
insert is like typical American
Anything that's
corporate. They're
got
going to package it.
protein
Yeah, you
that
don't
you
have to
can
pay
drink?
$4 for an Ensure.
Okay.
If you really need something quick on the way home and you need to get a case of Ensure, that is good. But some
Okay.
simple things that you can do that are very affordable is just getting some ice cream, a little bit of ice cream, and some whey powder, and then your favorite fruit. And that right there, fruit, whey powder, and an ice cream,
So if
that
someone
is,
just goes to a smoothie shop and they're like, "Hey, I need to get calories, I need to get protein, and I
they
need to
can
be
do
able
that
to
on the way
drink it."
home. But if they want to just keep some ice cream, favorite fruit, and the nice thing about dairy products generally, they are cold and soothing, and they're alkaline, and the lipids will coat the stomach. So if you have chronic gastritis, that's easy for
It's easy to go
metastatic
down
prostate.
the esophagus and into the system
Things
without
that are
having to
cold,
expel effort of chewing and
yeah, and things that are cold are they almost quiesce. They really quell any nausea. So cold milkshake, just every 30 minutes, go in and have a little sip of it, and that will really get people through a real low point where they're not eating much of anything. You do that smoothie milkshakes for a few days and supplement with low sugar sports and electrolytes. They now make gluten.
electrolytes is key.
Glutamine is an easy additive that's you can get at nutrition shops. Glutamine powder it's pure amino acid. Glutamine, there's 20 amino acids, and glutamine is the only one God gave us made that is gets absorbed across the GI tract without needing an active pump mechanism, meaning it doesn't need active transport in through the gut into your body. So if you're really sick, like burn victims, and they can't get nutrition in, glutamine is a good supplement. So a lot of the bodybuilders will take glutamine. So for cancer patients who are malnourished and are getting behind on their nourishment, and we can see their albumin dropping, their protein dropping, they're losing muscle mass. The spouse is upset. He doesn't eat his favorite food. I'm like, okay, milkshakes, whey powder, supplement with some glutamine and a little bit of sports drinks. That'll get you started right there. And then the easiest foods to digest for stage 4 cancer patients are going to be scrambled eggs, plenty of protein there, easy to go down. And then you want foods that will give your bowels something with a gentle fiber so the healthy bacteria can stick to it. If you don't have fiber, if you're just on the
I
American,
remember being told like kind of lay off the salads and the foliage because it
too
doesn't
much, too much,
digest
too much.
as it should and it would just
Those
mess
are hard.
things up.
Roughage, yeah,
Yeah, the
roughage is
roughage.
good for
Yes.
fiber, but roughage is not good if you've, especially a GI cancer, and you have little kinks in your bowel, and you try to think, oh, I'm going to have a high fiber diet and roughage. No, that's going to cause a kink or a scrape, and it's going to cause you issues. But what is gentle foods with good fiber that are easy to digest are foods with pectin, Pectin. And pectin is like in a lot of natural fruits, bananas, oatmeal, natural grains that are easy, and they will give your stools some bulk and be easy to digest.
I wanted to ask because, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but when I was going through my colitis bout and, when I was on like my third relapse and I had to make my own taper program and had the TPN and all that, I was living with my dad and my bonus mom, and I was eating literally probably a dozen to a dozen and a half scrambled eggs, to start the day, along with like a whole deal of like orange Danish rolls. But the way my bonus mom, Burley, as I call her, she made these scrambled eggs just so delicious. Like I could just like inhale them
Yeah,
almost. But I knew I was getting the protein, and I mean, like I craved them and
right.
everything. And so eggs as a whole, you got your cholesterol, you get protein, and I wasn't like super picky about where they came from. I needed to eat and I needed nutrients, but for the way that they're prepared, because you can make eggs in so many different ways, but the way that they were prepared, like, scrambled wise, with a little bit of butter, they just tasted so good, and I was able to like get it in. And that was kind of like how I would jumpstart my metabolism every day and get at least the minimal amount of nutrients and protein and everything I needed for the day. But I mean, I remember saying I'd lost like 30 pounds in 30 days and I had no appetite, but I found something, which was these scrambled eggs that she made, that I was just like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God, like this is the best thing ever.
Good that's got eggs in it is French toast. So French
Oh my
toast,
God, that's my
you get the fiber, you get bread that binds up the gastric acids, the bile acids,
That is actually my favorite food ever as a kid. When they'd be like, "Hey,
French
it's your birthday.
toast.
What do you want for dinner?" I'd be like, "French toast."
When you have stage 4 cancer and you have a hard time eating, and the smell and but French toast is it's good, it's gentle, it's soft, it's easy to digest, small amounts. then the other foods that will bind and absorb the acids and give the stool a little bit of form and bulk and prevent too much bloating and gas are baked potatoes. Nothing fried, not fried potatoes, nothing greasy, but just baked potatoes are really good for those patients that
Just
have
as is,
Upton's.
or what about putting all the toppings and dressings? How you get a loaded baked potato?
Trap is the first thing we tell our patients is this is hard, very hard for them to do, but really avoid the typical American diet that's everything's greasy or fried. Don't just cut that out because the grease and fried things, too much oily like pizza is grease, and with that, it will erode the natural mucin of the of mucous membranes, the whole GI. It'll erode it, and then you get your tissue paper thin mouth is has no coating left, and you can get ulcers and gastritis and enteritis. And so really they have to cut that. It's hard.
It is because
Yeah, yeah.
when you're used to eating certain foods, and to me, pizza is a food group. I kind of somewhat grew up on it. Like I like to consider myself a pizza connoisseur, but to realize like, wait a minute, you just hit a total point on that, which is, yeah, like it all the grease and everything that does play an effect on your gut as the after effect, like it can lead to some serious things, especially when you're trying to get your whole immune system in a healthy spot to where the medications you're taking all interact with each other correctively. And it's a difficult thing to kind of intake and to ingest, but it's super important.
Yeah, yeah. No grease. So we tell them they can have baked, broiled, steamed, grilled, but not a lot of grease or oil. And or the fryer. Now you have the dry fryer, the air fryer, like those
Yeah,
things are easier to digest and absorb without the grease.
gotcha.
So
I come up with a frequently asked questions PDF thing that I can post
yeah,
up because I get asked about this a lot. Like, one, foods, and then two, like what kind of supplements. And I started taking glucosamine and turmeric a couple years ago because of the avian necrosis, and recently it was brought to my attention. I'm like, am I taking any vitamin B or vitamin D like
yeah,
supplements? And I was like, no, I'm not. And so I went and picked up some recently, and it's hard to, unless you have the appropriate, like really good grocery shopping skills,
yeah.
to know what to get, and then once you get it, like how to prepare it and
Yeah.
everything.
So on that note, with supplements, this is the common some of the things we when we see patients and they're getting teed up for a study, and we tell them avoid the grease, avoid all carbonation that'll take chrome right off a car, and then a lot of these patients are on 5, 6 different supplements, and so there's a little bit of tough love. We say, okay, we know your family loves you, you got cousins, everybody's sending you herbs from China,
Yeah,
mushrooms from India, Cherokee Indian stuff, and ivermectin bottles. And we're like, okay, hold the phone. If you're going to go on a research trial and this is a big deal, we can't have anything interacting with the study drug that might either promote inflammation abnormally or interfere with the metabolism of study drugs. So we kind of be a
100%.
purist. And I say
Yeah,
the way the FDA wants us to know, even if you're on an over-the-counter drug, we can trace it and track it to a
just to know
CVS.
what's in your system and see if that might have
Bingo.
played a role in the benefit or not
So we're
of
like
the
multivitamins,
overall.
fine.
Yeah.
Vitamin B complex is fine. That helps nerve ending CO. Anybody that's got neuropathy from old chemo, B complex is good. But
Okay.
we typically tell them don't do a big spoon of like herbs and big hyper physiologic doses just because that can alter. They're like, oh, turkey tail mushroom is supposed to boost my immune system and turmeric and all these other. I'm like, yeah, it will boost your immune system. Let me tell you, you will get some inflammation in your gut. And when you're on immunotherapy, it will get amplified. So is that what you want?
Yeah.
And we don't want you to have,
You
just like you can't inhale smoke into your lungs on immunotherapy, campfires,
we
no
were talking about that on the
firewood,
last convo.
none of
Yeah.
that. So we have to keep people out of an itis. And so same with the gut. So a lot of weaning off of the American diet, healthy foods, diverse noodles and rice are good to digest. Just don't pile on all the greasy, salty stuff.
I've been researching and just generally overall looking a lot more into the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's extremely healthy. In fact, there's a lot of products or foods that we have in our country that are illegal throughout the rest of the world because of the ingredients that are within there. And
Yeah.
I become so much more cognizant of reading labels. And, for example, like bread, we should only have like 4 ingredients. And if it's got like a slew of lists and it takes you 2 minutes to read what all is in there, like,
Yeah.
is it really good for you?
Yeah, you don't get me started. Like, so we now seeing all these tsunami of cancer cases and even younger people getting cancer and reading what's in the dyes. And there's just a lot of bad news in what is in the industry. Is that the one thing good the administration is doing is raising awareness about that? Couple of the scary facts that we've recently seen, and this is kind of one of the things I try to eat healthy. And I used to have whey powder and, exercise and a little bit of creatine and glutamine after building stay in shape, mountain biking. And I was upset because I realized that one of my protein powders tasted so good. I was like, this tastes good, protein powder. Whatever.
Why does it taste so good?
Then I realized a month later it had sucralose in it. Sucralose.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, sucralose sounds so benign. It sounds so natural, but no,
That's a sugar, isn't it?
it's a synthetic sugar made with a chemical process synthetically, not a natural sugar. The problem is, and most Americans don't know this, is when it gets metabolized by the human body and gets processed and metabolized, the derivatives, the sucralose acetate, which is a derivative as it gets broken down, those derivatives can be toxic and even cause DNA breakage. And that's been published in the medical journals and out of my alma mater,
PubMed.
Chapel Hill. They've got some good data on that. So I now tell patients, I'm really nervous about dyes, sugars that are like synthetic sugars. Because your body takes sugars and it makes building blocks out of sugars.
Because you
And
can get sugars from natural fruits.
Yeah, natural fruits are fine.
But when you get when store-bought processed sugars, there's
Yeah.
added chemicals that
Yeah.
make it so, and those aren't always.
So I really worry about that. We had a personal bad story. We had a rescue, pandemic. The kids get rescue dogs. We had a nice rescue Australian Shepherd. My daughters, they adored the dog. I like the dog. I'm not a dog person, but I like this dog, And my daughter had a bottle of bubble gum and tipped over, and the dog just ate 20 or 30 pieces of bubble gum.
It doesn't digest well in a dog's,
She
digestive
came into my
system.
room at midnight and it was like, oh, a dog just ate this bottle. It has xylitol in it. I'm like, xylitol? And I'm half asleep. I don't think that doesn't, I don't know that as a toxin in humans. But she had done some vet tech, veterinary assistant, dental tech or something. And she had known that because she said, no, I need to call the vet. And I'm like, okay, wake up your mom. I didn't know it was that bad, but she went to the vet clinic. Dog ate, 20 pieces of xylitol, and he ended up getting the dog a liver failure. And I was underplaying. I didn't realize that could happen. And I'm educated, and I hate synthetic sugars. I hate that stuff. But I didn't even realize in the middle of the night that was a big deal. But in the veterinary world, that's a big deal. So that's just an example of synthetic or sugars that humans shouldn't have, even though it's in our gum, it's in our food system. But for other animals imagine if you have a little bit of a sick liver and then you take xylitol, maybe that causes problems. I took a deep dive in xylitol. And unfortunately, the dog ended up dying from liver failure. So we learned our lessons. But guess what? Xylitol, there's data in the scientific literature. Xylitol causes dysbiosis, causes abnormal gut microbiome. I'm like, all these things can lead to bad outcomes with those on chemotherapy or those getting immunotherapy. So I'm on this tirade now about these chemicals from xylitol to sucralose and its derivatives and its downstream metabolites, just not good. And so it turns out there are kids who are so upset their dog died from xylitol, they introduced a bill into Congress about awareness and get xylitol out of the food chain. So I'm like, what? Good for you, kids. And the bill hasn't.
Yeah.
Yes, but there's one thing everybody can agree about. We shouldn't let people's COVID pet dogs die from xylitol because it's in every gum. It's in everything. So you can't even go to the grocery store and get a pack of gum without xylitol in it. That's a joke. So my wife and I have to go and find, where's the old-fashioned gum, the old Wrigley's that they don't even make it anymore. The old gum,
which is a simple products without all this added stuff that's come over the years with flavors and.
So difficult to just get the right. We order it, so we have non-xylitol gum, but you got to special order it, online. So so that's what's going on. I think those kinds of things are happening in the background, unfortunately, especially with the dyes. We don't like dyes. So, and some patients like, oh, they ask me, oh, should I avoid sugars? I was like, no, healthy sugars. But anytime you have a high sugar processed food, insulin spikes. That's what insulin technically stimulates insulin growth factor. Insulin growth factor is on a lot of cancer cells. And we know that in the Petri dish. A lot of the drugs in development are now targeting insulin growth factor families, growth of insulin and its other evolutionary other versions of it. But one of the side effects is insulin blockade. So it just shows, I think, too much sugar obesity is linked to cancer. And certainly if your immune system is living in a high sugar environment, it doesn't work good. It gets all glycosylated and that slows it down. So just another lesson there. If you're going to have cancer, avoid processed high sugars, greasy, fried, dyed foods, eat organically. I think that's good. And then the other thing in the literature now is exercise, exercise, exercise. Unbelievable how
Keep the
important.
body in motion stays in motion, right?
And I'm like, yeah, try to live healthy. Doctors try to be somewhat healthy. He's busy as heck. Don't have time for golf. So what can you do? A little bit of exercise. So, but these presentations now in the scientific literature, if you just exercise like 4 or 5 times a week, your outcome, your survival is like 30% better. Survival. And that's as good as many study drugs. That's as good as old fashioned chemo. That's like huge. Yeah. You can put your fingers through the survival curve, like of how much of an improvement just exercise has in cancer patients. And that was all done within the trenches, academic researchers, big collaborative networks, making these good controlled clinical trials and very impressive. So now we tell all of our patients, you got to have a steady, each time I want you to come back to the next visit, having walked further. I want to see your resting heart rate get lower and lower because you're getting stamina, you're getting your muscle mass back.
One of the things that I was real cognizant about doing, and it wasn't because of like the health related results, but it was more of like I didn't want like the pity party kind of a thing. But when I was in active treatment and doing systemic therapies, I would try to schedule it either in the first thing of the day or at the end of the day. And if I scheduled it in the first thing of the day, then I would go to work afterwards and or the end of the day. But my work wasn't like a desk job. I was actively like in and out of my truck and I was walking houses. And so I wasn't necessarily doing I wasn't like going to the gym and doing any specific workouts, but I was, I guess you could say, like getting my steps in as much as I could. And, some movement is better than none, to where I was offered and even tried it for like a day there. My employer wanted me to try to still be like of service to my company, but do it like within the office environment, and just it drove me nuts. I couldn't stand staying still. And over the last couple of years since I've left the professional world of being a W-2 employee and I'm trying to do what I'm doing now, I noticed that there's a difference when my calendar's busy and I'm at conferences and traveling and doing stuff, like just when I'm constantly moving, especially when you're at a conference and you're walking from one area to the next, one exhibit hall to the next, and you're stay moving, you're staying active. Generally, mentally, one feel better, but two, that results in your physicality of feeling better. And I was speaking, one of my first guests I had with this, who was in the same clinical trial program, who had the same diagnosis and all that, out of Colorado. He was telling me, I think he had like an exercise bike in his hospital, or, that he was able to still access while he was admitted for the couple of weeks. But the importance of the importance of continuing to move. And I was constantly encouraged, at least daily, if not multiple times a day, to get up, and I would grab like the pole that had all my IV things connected to me, and I would walk up and down the halls and stuff and get as much movement as I can, have people come with me and stuff. But like the stagnation of just not moving, it's until you don't do it for a while, you don't really realize that how important it is to keep your body moving. It affects everything, like your muscles, your metabolism, your appetite, your energy, like your sleep. Like there's just this chain effect. And so I really wish that there was a more specific study about what it is I did and when I did it as I was going through all of my treatment. But I really strongly believe that still trying to work when I could work, and all the different miscellaneous activities I was able to do did contribute to my survival. I mean, can't really necessarily prove it now, but I really do feel. And then also the my eating habits changed as I got out of the hospital in 2020, and it wasn't like a snap of the finger over the night thing, but
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
last couple of years, I'm definitely way more cognizant about what I put in my body and how I grocery shop. And I used to be a very frequent drive-through person, and definitely not anymore. Like the frozen food section I was very familiar with, and couldn't even tell you where it is anymore because
Yeah.
I don't buy anything from there unless it's like frozen vegetables or frozen fruits.
Hey, what I'm afraid of, like, this is really bad, but it's so true, but it's so true. I don't know if I should even like cry about it, but the microplastics,
Oh my god,
I feel horrible that I would, for years I would just buy plastic bottles thinking they were safe. And my
I'm
wife,
still guilty of it.
don't microwave this plastic. I was like, I don't think that matters. But now
Well, I don't microwave anything plastic, but I'm still guilty of buying the plastic bottled
there's
water.
there's microplastics now in umbilical cord blood of like
In
in
cord blood?
baby. Yeah, in cord blood.
Oh
And it's
no.
like lots of it, and in placental tissue. So it's in the environment so much. It's now they're finding it at animal kingdom in the bottom of the ocean. That the animal kingdom that's like,
Well, there's so much plastic in the ocean. It's stupid and it's so sad, man.
there
It
hasn't
breaks
yet
my
been
heart.
a direct link of microplastics to cancer, but most scientists can think of the chronic inflammation over antigen stimulation, proliferation of like epithelial lining of the GI tract and foreign bodies, like, just that's how basically mesothelioma starts. Mesothelioma is, oh, you inhale asbestosis. It's chronic inflammation for decades and decades. That's where the talc powder, it's chronic
It
inflammation.
remind me of mesothelioma. That's a blood cancer. Is that correct?
Mesothelioma, it's a technically it's a sarcoma because it's not
Okay.
an epithelial lining, nor is it a liquid tumor like leukemia and lymphoma. It's in the middle, it's mesenchymal. It's the pleural lining. When 50 years ago, when people were around asbestosis, they inhaled it. The firefighters, people that worked on,
Is
building
there
construction.
is there cell therapy treatments for that, like TILs or CAR T? Do they?
We actually published, I think I was the first author on a PD-1 antibody, scientific name's avelumab, PD-1 antibody
So
with
there is
mesothelioma, and it worked.
immunotherapy.
It worked good for mesothelioma, and so that's one of the treatments. We had patients benefit,
Beautiful.
but those were environmental toxins. I guess you don't think asbestosis. It's in the
So
environment. I think it's even natural.
yeah, older
One of
buildings like
it
that was a
gets in.
thing.
Yep, it gets inhaled and goes all the way to the very most outer part of your periphery of your lung, and it's that chronic inflammation that causes the start of a mesothelioma cancer. So you can almost make these indirect comparisons with microplastics in the human body for decades. That chronic healing, proliferation of the lining, that could be in the future causing, maybe that's one of the causes of why we're seeing a rise in GI cancers. Although no hardcore link has been made, but that's what I worry about. So
It
I
would
don't
need
even
more
want to have, look at this.
studies
I'm
and
drinking from, everything now is metal or
yeah.
glass. And I get
That's
the water filters, the highest filtration water filters, the
I
best
need
one.
to increase and improve upon that with the
Yeah,
filter
yeah,
changing and
yeah.
everything, but
So
100%.
yeah. So I think that hopefully that America and like other are becoming more aware of these environmental toxins and what they can do. They do have control of their life. You have destiny of what you choose to put in your body. You can find the foods and the containers that don't have plastic in them, and you can hopefully design your household to have the best filters and then exercise to help. If you have cancer, do those things, and if you have a family history of cancer, do those things so you can avoid
help
the
prevent. And
yeah.
so, like, for example, like water is totally my main source of what I drink, and I definitely try to make sure I get in my allotted amount, if not more. And basically, like, if you go to the grocery store, to any grocery store, they sell water by the cases, they sell by the gallon, but it's always cased within, a plastic container of sorts. And you got to imagine, once it gets bottled into that, and then it gets shipped, and it's sitting on a truck, and it's in the heat, and it's in the, and it goes through all these temperature changes, and then over time. So by the time like a person actually gets to it and then goes to consume it, like, you can't see it with the naked eye, how much, from that bottle might have like flaked off into the actual water. But if you're getting your main water source from your house, say like through your fridge or your sink, but then you have like I forget even what the names of them are, but to where you can take your tap water and and you put it in the deal and it filters itself, and then you can keep it in your fridge. I mean, that's probably one of the best and like healthiest ways to drink water. And then when you go to pour it into a container to drink, like a non-plastic container, like you said, like whether it's either preferably glass and or a metal would be the preferred deal. So that way, like whether it's in heat or in an environment to where there's not going to have the possibility for the plastics to flake off into it. Is there, I'm not even sure, and I'm sure there is, but is there like a test where you could go get tested to find out if you have microplastics in
There,
your
yeah,
system?
not like a commonly available commercial,
You'd have to
like
specifically
it's
go
not something you
ask.
check a box. But if you do enough, and maybe that'll be our next video. I can do some homework on that. One of our PhDs, Brenton Dixon, he's our chief technology officer. He did mass spec for his PhD, mass spec as a way to look at any chemical in anything that you can run it through an analyzer. And that's the only way you really can detect plastics is you've got to look at every different, the molecules of the plastic in water. It might be the very small parts per million, but they're there. So you have to do it by mass spectroscopy or mass spec. And they can tell you not only that, they can tell you what are the other heavy metals, they can tell you what are the drugs. They can tell you if somebody had cocaine in their body, I mean, weeks ago, it can get that specific. We now have detection. This is the true story. They can literally in the water systems now of the big sewage treatment plants, they can look at, as you probably have heard, they can look at
Yeah,
DNA strands and say who has COVID or who doesn't, who has these
because
other diseases.
people will go dump their old prescriptions or their drugs into
They
their toilet, and
with
then that
mass
gets
spec,
back mixed within the
DNA,
water.
the DNA RNA, they can actually look to see what are the infectious diseases, and the mass spec will look at who dumped their digoxin down.
I heard. I mean, I don't have any streaming
How much
channels, but
wheat
I thought there
yellow
was a
into the sewage?
documentary recently about like it was like cocaine alligators or something
Yeah,
like that, to where the animals that are out like in the natural environment that
yeah.
drink the water that eventually comes up from the
They drink from
groundwater.
the
That
creeks. Yeah, they drink from the creeks, and
yeah,
unfortunately,
and the water that you flush
metals.
down your toilet that
Yeah,
goes through the whole filtration system and even comes through
yeah,
our own tap water goes through the animal system as
yeah.
well, and they can find traces of that.
The two thoughts come to mind. One is there was in the past year or two, in the popular news press, in the news feed, it did say that yeah, when you get just a plastic bottle and drink from it compared to tap water, regular tap water in a
In a
city,
glass, yeah,
yeah,
water in a glass.
there are more toxins, knowing the microplastic toxins in that glass, in that plastic container water, the high dollar water you pay for it.
That is supposedly like from a natural spring.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just so now when guests come to our clinic, I don't want to give them the plastic bottles anymore. We now just give them a cup or a glass with the tap.
Well, I've noticed that out of the last handful of conferences, including the Deloitte Next Gen one where I met
Yeah,
you at, and then I was in New York a few weeks after that
yeah,
with the ACGT, and the bottle of water was out of a glass bottle that you would pour into your glass cup on the tables. And then a lot of the other events, like there's no more like plastic pitchers or like,
yeah.
oh, here's the bottle of water cooler that's out
Yeah.
of plastic bottles, like a lot more cognizant flexion around that. And especially when you're within the field of what you're doing and what I'm trying to advocate
Yeah.
for is healthy habits. And
Yeah, me even this sounds kind of funny, but it's on the same train of thought here is when I go to the dentist, I love my dentist. But they always are like they're always, oh, you need an annual x-ray. I was like, I don't think I do. I don't want x-rays
unless you feel like you have something that's wrong and you're like, hey, I
unless
need
there's
to get
something really
confirmation.
bad, I just don't want the radiation. I just know.
Well, like how much can a person really take? Because I had to write it down, and over just the course of my cancer diagnosis from 2018, I have had 6 PET CTs. I've had over 30 some odd brain MRIs with and without contrast. I've had over 30 some odd chest, abdomen, and pelvis CT scans. A similar amount of CTs of head and neck with and without contrast. I've had a handful of CTs and MRI specifically just for my hips because of that AVN necrosis. A handful of x-rays in and out in between, and when you add it all up, I easily say, like, I've definitely had over 100 scans within the last half dozen years or so, and
Some
I don't think they can be that good. I mean, I'm still here.
it's tough because you need to have imaging to make sure your cancer is not relapsing. If you have a solitary tumor, it's oligometastatic, they might be able to resect it. So we'd want to catch it early.
Yeah.
And you can't really get an MRI of the lung because MRIs don't work good
No,
when
so they need to do a CT if they know it's already there. Like, because I was asking that, like, when you first get diagnosed, they do a PET scan just to see where the uptake is, just so they can kind of know. And then once they know the area of the body where it's kind of at, the CTs are more accurate
correct.
because
Yeah.
they're able to go
And
into the slices and stuff. And when you go to the dentist, supposed to go, I guess, twice a year for a cleaning, but they recommend that once a year they do X-rays just to
yeah,
double check if you have any
yeah,
cavities or not.
yeah. I think they can visually inspect just about everything. So for me, I don't buy that about needing that much x-rays to your gums or your teeth or the PET scan. I think in the American healthcare industrial complex, PET scans are probably overutilized when they're being done sequentially, in my opinion. And PET scans, I can't make this up. This is totally legit. If you get a PET scan and you go to the airport the next day,
You got radiation that they,
look,
yeah.
all the TSA all going to come. You're going to be glowing. And I
Well,
have
they
it.
come in there with that metal vial that looks like it came out of like and it has the hazardous like material
Yeah.
sign on it and everything.
For grins, for grins, I bought like a $40 Geiger counter detector for one of our patients, just for a teaching point, mainly to just play with it and say, oh, who had a PET scan yesterday and who had a PET scan 3 weeks ago, and then are they still ticking with radioisotopes ticking? Yes, so they are still radioactive. And those who get, there are what we call it radioactive radio conjugates or radioisotope conjugates, which are very promising drugs and are used for prostate cancer. I'm not taking it away that the drugs are very promising. They really work. But the radiation scatter from those antibody radioisotope drugs, patients are still emitting hundreds and thousands of Geiger counter ticks from down the hallway
I mean,
so just is, I don't know what we don't know yet. What is that really doing? The patients are told, oh, when you go home, collect your soiled clothing. Don't let the grandkids sit in your lap.
yeah, try to,
Can't be spilled.
isolate yourself essentially for like a day or two and, drink lots
But
of.
so those drugs are powerful, but at the same time, there's a little bit of some awareness and responsibility we have to be as those ultimately get urinated out and they get in the system. I actually had one of my neighbors is a nuclear medicine, or no, it works at the nuclear power plant, and they test their waters for radioactivity. And he says that they can tell in the water of the big Lake Norman here if somebody had a radioactive thiodine treatment weeks ago, like from in those water testings, because it's still in, they can still detect those. I said, oh, and I told him, I said, you're going to start seeing a lot more of all these other radioactive heavy metals that are now being used for all kinds of medical treatments. That's going to be showing up in your mass spec in the water downstream, because ultimately those still get into the environment. They still get in
That
sorts of
totally makes
things that,
sense.
as wonderful as those drugs get prostate cancer patients out of a cancer pain crisis and the PSA comes down and those drugs have activity, they also have some environmental effects that we're going to end up having to deal with in knowing what do we do with this? What precautions do people now start having? Not only do they have a water barrier for their filtration, do they start looking at Geiger counters in their water
Yeah.
stream?
Is there like you can go to the drugstore that'll be like on a end cap where it'd be like, hey, like you're buying like bandages or something, but here get a Geiger counter just to
Yeah,
kind of see like how radioactive you may or may not be.
yeah,
Like I kind of wonder that myself because my PET scans were spread out throughout that time, but most of the time they were used like especially to confirm from what the CTs were like. When I had my complete metabolic response and it was showing up as calcified and necrotic, what was still left indetectable, that's why I would do a PET CT, was to confirm that, because if there was uptake, it would glow and highlight on that PET CT. And so it was kind of more of a confirmatory thing
yeah,
and stuff. And so I'm having to learn about necrosis and, tumors that become calcified and everything. And, I tell people I had so many, especially within my lungs, that they just said
yeah,
innumerable amounts. And so,
yeah,
yeah, after I had a CMR, there was just a handful of those necrotic lesions. And that's what they used to kind of monitor, which still continued to shrink as I was going
yeah,
through my quarterly scans
yeah.
and stuff. And so, but it was really weird for me and still kind of is to go from scanning like at least 4 times a year to down to like twice a year.
That's good.
And it's always kind of like in the back of my mind, just a little bit, but
You're
I
you're you're very lucky, complete remission, durable remission. So that brings up a question maybe for you. So a lot of our patients have scan anxiety.
anxiety. Yes,
It's
that's a
debilitating.
real.
Every 3 months, it's very real, and the spouses have a hard time. The caregivers have a hard time with that. Like, my spouse, the scan's 3 weeks away in the future, and then the next 3 weeks is so much anxiety builds up, and they can't sleep, and they can't focus, they can't enjoy themselves, and these are real
It's
things with
paralyzing.
those. Yeah,
100%. Yes, sir.
yeah,
Especially when you're preparing for it, you're going into it, and then you're waiting not only for the results at the portal, but then also your follow-up appointment with your oncologist, your specialist, review both the report and the images, and to also be able to understand. And that's why a lot of patients that I end up connecting with, because when you visually look at a PET scan, it's easy to see the body and go, okay, here's what's happening. When you're looking at a CT scan, unless you understand like anatomy, you got to remember, okay, like it starts at the head, moves its way down, and this section is this, and these organs are that, and this is how you can tell if something's abnormal or not. But it's a total real thing. And when it comes to what cancer overall, there's, I guess, a handful of pillars, being the obviously like the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the financial. Once you hear those words like you have cancer, like all of those pillars like will increase no matter what the end result is. They will always be more than they were before. And I'm not shy to say this at all, but I just recently got some assistance through some family members, and they were able to help line me up with a new psychotherapist. I just had my first appointment with her, start seeing her, but all the things that you need to exist, like, don't go away once you're done doing treatments, or you get your scans that say that, hey, you're clean and clear. You know what I mean? Like, life's got to continue on, and there's so many factors that come into play. And what I have been increasing on highlighting is the human aspect, both mentally and emotionally, not only from the patient, but from people on the other side, like yourself, that are the physicians, the clinicians, the researchers, and those that are behind the scenes that are doing it. Because just like a family member to a patient, like not everybody makes it. They have as a patient that has anxiety, a family member has that same kind of anxiety of like, how do I help and how do I contribute? And doing the same thing. They're trying to predict the future. And then on the physician or clinician, the medical community side, like, y'all are there to help. But at the same time, like, I know it's got to take a toll. And I hope that there's resources available to y'all's community to help you the same that there is for us. And if not, should
Yeah.
be. But as they're planning clinical trials and treatments and everything, like, it's not just the during the care, but the aftercare and the focus on the survivorship, both for the patient, their families, and for the team that helped them get there. You know what I mean? Because they're just as important and play just an integral part of all that. And so I want to make sure that that's always recognized and
Hmm.
appreciated,
Yeah.
because without it, like, none of us would be here. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Good
So
point. No, I mean, you're a cancer survivor. I like the word survivorship, survivors. Most survivors, they're fighters. They find the energy, somehow they find the strength within them. And it's honorable to work with cancer patients. And we see the best and worst of families. I mean, it's the other reality check here is sometimes some families can't cope.
it's
And
hard.
they need more help than the cancer patient because the worst comes out, the best comes out, and families fall apart. And or families strengthen and get together, and sometimes they just struggle. And so there are good services in most medium-sized cities. The local hospice, local advocacy groups, the local hospital systems have psychotherapists. Like both hospitals in town here have psychiatrists just on their oncology. They're oncology oriented, which is great. They know what meds cancer patients tend to do better with: appetite, sleep, mood, that distract pain, and how to balance that as opposed to some other non-cancer patient who might be on a different set of meds. So yeah, and cancer pain can make people depressed.
Yeah.
And cancer patients themselves sometimes just forget the will to live just because they're fighting cancer so much. They're fighters and it's honorable. And boy, they fight like hell for a year, but then in their own mind, it's like running a marathon. That second and third year is impossible for them because the life starts to just fall apart. And we do see that, and that's real. Regarding the healthcare providers, most people, most nurses and doctors and people that go into medicine, there's definitely a different type that go into oncology because they know what they're getting. Yeah, like the angels, the nurses are angels. They love being around these types of environment where there is an extra level of emotional support, spiritual needs. I like
Yeah.
science part. I'm like, hey, this is that biggest lofty scientific challenge to try to cure cancer. But it is definitely a different mini culture within medicine. And a lot of medicine is just like a broken
Yeah.
industrial complex. But within that oncology space, it definitely is a premier group of people that are in it. The 1% of doctors want to be oncology docs, 1% of nurses want to do oncology. But when they're in it, they're golden, they're sold for life, they love it, they would never do anything different. Because of that cultural, spiritual, humanitarian, it's a pastoral calling, right? To do
Yes.
oncology. So it's a pastoral calling. So
And it's one of those things to where it's like any job or anything, like getting into the industry in the medical oncology clinical settings, going into it, that there's gonna be the highs and the lows, and it becomes a part of it. And it's not meant for everybody, and you can really feel it as a patient when someone like truly cares about what they're doing. You can just feel it when you're talking to them. I mean, I can't even begin to start to talk about, like, especially like the nurses. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Because as a patient, you probably see them, more than you see anybody, because they're the ones that are coming in and checking your vitals and a lot of charting as the doctors are making their rounds and everything and stuff. And one of the things I was thinking, I was like, well, as new clinical trials are being thought of and like put into action, I would like to hope and assume that it eventually just become kind of standard. That I know that if requested upon, there is resources available, but to help make some of those things kind of more standard. Because for someone like myself, I knew that there was resources available, but I had to proactively ask for them. It
yeah,
wasn't really like reminded about what was available or how to access those and everything. And I always just assumed and thought that after I got done with treatment, I could just pick up where I left off before it all and just go back to life. And,
yeah.
I I didn't know what was going to be ahead of me or how it was all going to change or how everything I did prior to my clinical trial was going to have a long-term effect on me.
Yeah.
So, like, I would love to see that there is either whether it's a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, or whatever that would either be on staff or on contract or retainer that
Yeah.
has a background, not necessarily in the disease, but also but within the treatment of these cell therapies, because yes, they do take a toll, but the majority of them are considered these one-time treatments.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the understanding of the quality life that is results from, that's why I'm always a proponent that clinical trials should not always be a last resort. And if you could get
Yeah.
to them
That is
sooner than
true.
later,
Yeah.
but I'm also a huge advocate for, like I was saying, the doctors and the medical community, because if you can't get to the doctors in the hospital, they can't help you. And so you do what you got to do to survive. But I guess the question comes back and circles around to, what does survivorship really mean? And it's all individualized and
Sure.
specific, but it hits heavy on today because today is Rare Cancer Survivor Day. It's now been 7+ years since I've been diagnosed, and, for someone with my diagnosis, they don't make it that those numbers
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
especially once you go from stage 3C to 4. My participation in clinical trial, that efficacy and those numbers, and, just it reminds me, coming in October, my annual payment for my fertility preservation banking payment is due, and there's just so much. But I'm glad
Yeah.
you brought up the anxiety part,
Yeah.
because that is across the board. Every patient can relate to, and their families, because they're right there next to them. And so I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Bad as my diagnosis and my cancer was on me, it was probably just as bad, if not worse, on my family, my caregivers. And
Yeah.
my heart goes out to them. And I'm
Yeah.
so blessed for all of them, and the love and the care, and all of my doctors and all of the nurses in
Yeah.
all the settings. And even as we connected, I mean, I remember you telling me you were a student under Dr. Rosenberg at one point, correct? And it took over 4, almost 5 decades from the conception of that
Yeah.
treatment to finally get its approval. And
Mhm.
all of the work and the patience and everything that goes into it, I mean, it's a lot, but it's just, to me, it's a major point and change in history,
Yeah.
which in years to come, people will look back like on these moments of, these things that have happened within this last decade with
Mhm.
immunotherapy and cell therapy, and going from like the 70-year plus regimen of cut it out, get chemotherapy, do radiation, to switching to using your body's own immune system and using your own
Yeah.
cells to combat whatever it was that made you sick to make you better.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of love, and I got a lot of respect for the whole community,
Yeah.
and just really stoked about, the more I look into your organization and everything that y'all are doing. To be honest, man, I'm jealous of how busy you are in your calendar, because I mean, you're out there doing the work, and it's taxing, man. And
Yeah. Thank you.
much
Yeah.
love and so much respect to you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm kind of a workaholic. A lot of the people in cancer research become the joy of trying to advance the science and help patients and seeing patients, those things will feed off each other. You end up becoming a workaholic. So I have to sometimes balance. So at least know how to remember to have other activities with my mountain bike or my camera or my cool Chinese drone that's probably going to be illegal soon. But regarding survivorship, so because you've done very well, because you found a purpose, you're driven. A lot of cancer patients, they can't get over that hump. The depression's overwhelming. They don't reach out to the typical male, doesn't reach out to his friends. They lose a lot of contacts. They don't want to go to support groups. The spouses feels like they can't talk about it, and it's like a secret, and they can't please their spouse because they don't have any taste buds left. So there's a lot of these dynamics that are definitely a pattern. And there's a dynamic of denial. That's the worst, where the spouse is like, oh, I'm going to keep working really hard because I got to pay the expensive cancer bills for my cancer patient family. and they just become detached. And that's not good either. They're in denial and total detachment. So the best way we try to address some of these dynamics as people come in and they're going to be experimented on for a trial. We're like, hey, this is the come to Jesus talk. You can't be in denial. You can't be a worrywart. You can't like be too doting that you have your own burden that he's not eating your meals. We have to kind of reset all those things and also encourage the patient to like find their purpose. And it's because sometimes that one spouse will be like, oh, he's too sick. He's got cancer. He can't clean the garage. I'm like, no, 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 no. He can clean the garage. You got to let him go clean the garage. That's his job. I'm telling you to get.
He's
You
got to
got to
learn how
work.
to do it at his own
Yeah,
pace.
like
Don't
encourage him
strip
to
him of
go.
all his freedoms,
The
or
other extreme is
abilities.
that's where someone like, oh, he can't do anything. Like, no, 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 no. We need him to walk further every week. He needs to climb more stairs. He needs to do these things. Because that's his mental health and ethos. He's got to have a purpose. And then for women, also, they find a purpose. It might be their angle that they want to do with their friends, support groups, or getting engaged, or starting foundations is a common example, or how they rally to do, things. We have good programs here where patients will paint and draw and Christmas trees and hang these things up. We have this thing going at our clinic right now. Remember that thing was like a flat something, like a flat Elmo or a flat where he would travel around to different cities and people would write in a scrapbook. And it was had to do with something named flat. Anyways, they're doing this now at our clinic where they have these different ducks and the ducks go home with patients and people write in a scrapbook how the patients are feeling, like the patients, how their families doing. It's kind of this thing passing around and it's making the staff all happy and the other patients are getting to know each other because they're all sharing in this scrapbook that they're writing in. It's very interesting. So these little things are helping lift spirits and giving them a small purpose in life to hopefully step back out and find some other purpose, even with their stage 4 cancer, to still find some purpose. I mean, I tell patients, hey, even if their cancer is getting worse and things don't look good, and like, listen, you got a big job to do. You got time left. You got to inspire people. You got to tell your story.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's when it's actually going down, I openly admit, like, I wasn't real talkative about what was happening to me as it was happening to me. It wasn't until years later, it was probably around 2022-ish or so, that then I started joining or rejoining support groups and then being more active and talking about everything, because as it was going down, I remember thinking, like, if I'm telling people like what the actual diagnosis is and what the prognosis is, they're just going to be treating me like I'm on my deathbed. And I didn't want the pity party, and I wanted them to I wanted to set the tone that it wasn't a matter of if but when I was going to make it. And I needed them and everybody around me to believe that I was going to make it. And like, if I set the tone, that they would follow behind. And because if you just go off of the statistics, like, I didn't want just people just showing up like they were just trying to say their goodbyes to me. And it was tough. And I saw a post today, which I got to give a lot of props to, and it's from the Emily Whitehead Foundation. And today they announced that they had advanced their mission statement from what has traditionally they have always been to just pediatric and just CAR T to patients of all ages and to all advanced cell and gene therapies. And
That's really
so
good. Good for them. Yeah.
when they're doing their believe bundles and stuff. And so that's essentially kind of something that I've been exploring, because a couple of years ago, I started this Facebook group and I just called it TILS, because there was all these disease specific support groups and stuff. And no matter how many patients were in there, like collectively, there might only be so many active people, but I decided I was going to start a group that was specific for TILS, because there wasn't one. And I was getting a lot of questions and DMs about it. And then, so I called it that. And then I eventually like amended the name to TILS, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced CGTs. So
Yeah.
whether you're a CAR T patient or doing CRISPR or some sort of cell therapy, you could join. And for the first year, it only had maybe like not even a dozen people or so. And then somebody from one of the other groups had asked a question and then brought up, well, Chris White created this group, and now it's getting close to like almost like 300 like people and growing, but there was a need for it. So I feel very purposeful in what I'm doing. Like I said, my entire life up until I got diagnosed with cancer. I just felt like I was this like wandering, floundering soul. What I did for employment was a paycheck. But when you get asked as a like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wasn't really sure, but essentially, just like a lot of things, you gotta try things to figure out what it is you like and you don't like. And
Yeah.
that Wayne Gretzky thing, man, you're only going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And it didn't dawn on me until 2+ years after I finished my very last treatment that I was like, I feel so good. And I get this kind of endorphin adrenaline rush. And I know that the reason why I am still here is to share my story and to help provide hope. And hopefully there'll be enough noise surrounding clinical trials and cell therapies that when anybody gets diagnosed, it'll ring a bell to like ask those questions and seek out those sort of things. And that's kind of thing like there is no education and awareness thing that's line item anywhere or a marketing program for people to know that there's no assemblies being made at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, like if these even exist. To get into the cell therapy field as a professional, you usually fall into it by default by
Yeah.
being a biology or a chemistry or an architect or engineer major, and then somehow you get an opportunity comes across or whatnot. But the more that conversations we have and the more we talk about it and the more that comes across, and every time that we get together and do, there's just something that pops up, and then after I'm re-listening to it and going, oh man, let's
Yeah.
definitely talk about that on the next one, because that, that really rang a bell.
Well, your story can mobilize interest and inspire patients. A lot of patients feel lonely and that they're not aware. They might just see only their oncologist, and and by hopefully watching shows like this and programming, they realize, hey, there's a community out there. There's people like me. Get involved. There's a lot to be done in cell and gene therapy, just in clinical trials. There's a lot. I mean, we need people that can
100%.
donate blood for research. We need people that can learn about outreach, cancer societies, driving people to appointments, getting involved. There's a lot of need for that, that even if it's just a few hours here and there to raise awareness and funds, or groups that want to go on walks or runs or, these 5Ks, those kinds of things really do mobilize the community and do inspire the cancer survivors that attend. Yeah.
100%, man. That's like you.
One of the things you said about the day you got diagnosed, and that changes everybody's life. Today, whether it's stage 1 cancer or stage 4 cancer, that changes everybody. It
Life will
reminds
never be
me,
the same after.
yeah, it's like, before,
Brand new existence.
like ADBC, it was the day in your life, for the milestone of where your barometer of everything before and after. But there is a good survey that was in the lay press, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, asking Americans. They must have polled maybe 1,000 or two Americans. What are you most afraid of? Getting robbed, a nuclear war, going bankrupt, tsunami, flood. Buried in there was heart attack, stroke, cancer. Cancer was always the number one thing that they were most afraid of ever in their whole life, above all the other nuclear war, everything
All the
else.
unpredictable
Uh,
things that could
yeah,
happen without
right.
notice.
So, if you're not afraid of cancer, maybe you'll kind of change your diet. Maybe you exercise. Maybe you'll stop smoking.
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll donate blood for research. Like, at our clinic, we take blood.
Yeah. I mean, like the whole topic of just donating blood. I did a Till Talk yesterday with Adrian Mendoza from BioBridge Global, which is a part of the Blood Centers of America network. And they're based out of San Antonio, and they all just celebrated like their 5th anniversary. And one of the things that they do, and they're the first to pioneer this, is they started providing blood on the helicopters for the medevac. So as patients that get in a car accident or a shooting or any kind of trauma situation where they got to get metaflighted from the scene of the incident to the hospital, they can receive blood. So by the time they get there, they're stable enough to get the surgery or whatever it is they need, and or on the ambulance. And also they just launched the world's first mobile leukapheresis bus where, you can do an apheresis or, like if you're like a CAR T patient, you live in a
Yeah,
rural area and can't make it to a center. But the need for blood to donate from healthy donors, whether it's whole blood, platelets,
yeah,
or whatever, is always been there and will always be here. And, I'm O positive,
yeah, yeah.
which is, a very universal blood to donate. But as an ex stage 4 melanoma patient. It's kind of real controversial on whether
Yeah.
I'm able to donate or not, and this and that and everything. But when I was in the hospital for those 13 days, 12 nights doing my TIL therapy, I did need a blood
Yeah.
transfusion
I believe it.
during my lymphodepletion. And then I also needed another one during, I think it was after my second of the 6 IL-2 infusions. I became anemic from all the immunotherapy I did before I
Yeah.
did TIL. I needed iron or whatnot. But no matter who you are or where you live, like to be able to participate and help within the community, a lot of times people like assume or will think to be able to contribute, you have to financially donate. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're can check all the boxes to where you
Yeah.
qualify and can
Absolutely.
donate blood, that doesn't cost a thing. You know what I
It's a
mean?
good comeback. I give this as a good
And
comeback to
anybody
people
can do it as
because
long as you it can check
I'm
all
like,
the
"Hey,
boxes.
nice
You
meeting
can
your
donate
young
blood.
your adult children. They're welcome to come anytime." And then say, "Hey, listen, I had to order a few transfusions for your dad a couple months ago. Can you do me a favor? Go to the community blood bank."
That's always going to be a need.
And I tell patients they can tell their family that they need to go donate, and that helps get them more
Yeah.
engaged.
I
So
mean, it's something is better than nothing, and that is something you can do. Even when I was in high school, I remember in the 90s
yeah,
because I graduated class of 2000. I remember I think you had to be like this was either in like 11th or 12th grade, but they would have blood drives at my school, and I remember thinking like, I get to get out of class for
yeah,
a little bit. I'd try to plan it like before lunch so I could have an
yeah,
extended lunch. I don't know or whatever with proper consent as long as you're healthy and obviously they go through a thorough checklist to make sure that like and they priorly test you that you don't have any unknown pathogens or diseases and they obviously check you because they don't want to pass that on. But
yeah,
blood is something that everybody can do. Not everybody can financially go donate
yeah,
or do some of these other things. But if there's blood centers between Blood Centers of America, the ABC, and the Red Cross. I think those are like the top 3 throughout the country and that supply the entire country, both for clinical trial science research and for just general like hospital needs. I had Victoria Gray, who was the first CRISPR patient to be cured from sickle cell disease and be that did CRISPR. And tell me she was like almost lived in the hospital and was getting blood transfusions all the time. I mean, like, but long story short is, yeah, giving blood is always had a need and will always have a need.
yeah. No, good point. Good point. Well, listen, let me get winding down here.
Yeah,
But this has been great again, and yeah, keep thinking of some good ideas for the next talk next month. And I'm heading to Barcelona in a couple of weeks to do a big presentation.
right
I'll have some
on.
days about digital health, trying to fix the digital health cancer research embedding trials. So that's one of my other.
Sounds cool. For everybody listening, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. Peace. All right, that concludes today's episode of Till Talks with Chris White as we talk TILs, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. I'd like to thank my guest today for joining me on Till Talks. To our listeners who have not yet done so already, please follow, comment, subscribe, share, and smash that like button. For more information about Till Talks and related resources, please visit www.tilltalks.com. I'm Chris White. As always, sending love to everybody. Peace.